back, everyone, to MTG Hacks. This week I wanted to go over one of the experience counters commander. I'm actually going to go over one that most people don't play, and I think is actually really good. The type of deck that you use with him is more of a control shell, utilizing a lot of enchantments. So let's go over what he does, and then I'll explain kind of my thought process in how I built him. So Daxos the Returned is 3 mana, 2/2, legendary zombie soldier. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get an experience counter. These counters don't go away. Just as long as you've casted an enchantment, it just ticks up and up from there. You could pay 3 mana, a black, a white, and a colorless. Put a white and black spirit enchantment creature onto the battlefield. It has this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of experience counters you have. So with the process with this deck is for me to play my commander third turn every time, and then go from there by casting enchantments that protect, support, and disrupt my opponents. So let's go through. So land base as always. I'm going to go through that real quick. So I have 18 basics. So let's kind of get those out of the way, and we'll get into some of the non-basic ones that matter. So we got Scrubland. I don't play any fetches in this deck because I don't have anything that will fully utilize them, and playing a fetch package does nothing for the deck. So I just play Scrubland. If I draw it, I draw it. If I don't, I don't. Then I play Temple of Silence, a little deck manipulation while color fixing. Isolated Chapel, just fixing. Caves of Koilos, fixing. Godless Shrine, fixing. And then Shambling Vents. I only play 2 creature lands. Shambling Vents being one of them. A little lifelink is something that has gone a long way with this deck. Command Tower, little fixing Vesuva, so I can actually grab another copy of Shambling Vents or another manland that an opponent's playing that I can use. Strip Mine, because I don't like my opponent's stuff. Vault of the Archangel, another lifelink kind of package. So you could pay 1, you tap it for 1, pay 4 mana, tap it, creatures you control gain lifelink and death touch. With my commander, I can actually create a huge army utilizing just Daxos. So having a army that's lifelink and death touch is very valuable. Once again, I've specified my love for Kor Haven. It saved my life quite a few times. Bojuka Bog. I don't want you to have stuff in your graveyard. Shizo. Legendary creature gains fear. I actually just like it because it's a cool land. That really, the second ability never comes into factor. Urborg, because I do play a significant amount more white, so the white land count's typically a little higher. So this will allow me to turn all my plains into swamps, and I have quite a few land searching effects that will only affect plains. So Sarah's Sanctum, because I'm running a lot of enchantment, so I want to make sure I can utilize some land, as well as Nykthos. Most of the enchantments are white, so I'm going to be producing a significant amount more white. Then Westvale Abbey, this is the other quote-unquote man land. Provides creatures, or it turns into one if things get rough. And its flip side is indestructible, so if someone tries to board wipe when I have 5 or more, I can keep this open, flip it over, have a big fatty swinging on them. So I have a lot of enchantments in this deck. I'd say a vast majority of the spells are enchantments to fit the theme. So I don't play any artifacts except for 1, but it won't play a factor with this. So it's Stony Silence. Activated abilities of artifacts cannot be activated. Greater Auramancy. Other enchantments you control have Shroud. Enchanted creatures you control have Shroud. 2 mana. Blind Obedience. I typically use it for the extort and the protection. Excuse me. So it's 2 mana, extort. Whenever you cast a spell, you can pay a hybrid, either black or white. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life, and I gain life equal to the life lost. Artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Karmic Justice is an amazing card. It's going to provide a lot of protection and deterrent for destroying your things. So whenever a spell or an ability an opponent controls destroys a non-creature permanent you control, you may destroy target permanent that player controls. So if someone does, let's say, Necromo's Vengeance, and I have 5 enchantments out in the battlefield, I can actually destroy 5 permanents of theirs, which is fantastic. So it can make it to where I'm not hurting myself. Then I got Crackdown, which I love this card. 3 mana, non-white creatures with power 3 or greater do not untap during their controller's untap step. This will stop the devoid creatures. This will stop artifact creatures. And this stops everything that isn't white. If I play against a white deck, it's kind of one of those downsides. Ghostly Prison is a way to protect me. Creatures can attack me unless their controller pays 2 for each attacking creature. Kismet, there's an errata on this card. It's 4 mana. It says all of target opponent's creatures, lands, and artifacts come into play tapped. The errata says each opponent. So I don't even target. It just says every opponent's lands, creatures, and artifacts come into play tapped. So that was the protection. This is still going with the protection theme. So Leyline of Sanctity, it's 4 mana. If it's in my opening hand at the beginning of the game, it comes into play on the battlefield. I have Hexproof. Then I got Citadel Siege, 4 mana. 99% of the time I'm choosing dragons, but as it comes into play, I can choose cons or dragons. Cons says at the beginning of my combat on each of my turns, I can put 2 1/1 counters on target creature I control, or dragons at the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn, I can tap 1 creature that player controls. So a great way to protect myself. Sphere of Safety is 5 mana. Creatures can attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So one clarification on this, they are enchantment creatures. So before combat, I can make 2 or 3 more creatures and then make them have to pay 2 or 3 more mana per attacking creature. I love that versatility that Daxos provides. Now we're getting into kind of draw or search type spells. So Vampiric Tutor just allows me to grab that great enchantment that I need at that moment. Same with Enlightened Tutor. A little bit of card draw, which is Night's Whisper, 2 mana. I draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Demonic Tutor, once again, just search for those great enchantments. Little bit of draw, Underworld Connections, 3 mana, enchant a land. Enchanted land has tap, pay 1 life, draw a card. Then Idyllic Tutor, search for another enchantment. So I have quite a few ways to search in this deck. Then I got Phyrexian Arena. At the beginning of my upkeep, I draw an extra card and lose a life. Draw a card and lose a life, pardon me. Read the Bones, 3 mana, scry 2, draw 2, then lose 2 life. Increasing Ambition, it's 5 mana, search my library for any card, put it in my hand. If I paid the flashback cost, which is 8 mana, I search for 2. Then now we're getting into a little bit of destruction. So Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshare are an auto-include. Then we got Anguished Unmaking, because one of the deck's biggest problem is because it does play a significant amount more control, is that I need to be able to exile planeswalkers and things of that sort so that I'm not getting bogged down by them. Vindicate, once again, same ideology. I got Toxic Deluge. It's 3 mana as an additional cost, pay X life. All creatures get -X, -X. Then we got Utter End, just exiles a non-land permanent. Damnation destroys creatures. Merciless Eviction. I get to choose one, exile all artifacts, or exile all creatures, or exile all enchantments, or exile all planeswalkers. So it gives that just great power there. Decree of Pain, it allows me kind of a draw / kill everything. Destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated. Draw a card for each creature destroyed this way, or I can cycle it. Cycle it's 5 mana. When you cycle it, you draw a card as well. You discard it and draw a card as an instant. Whenever you cycle Decree of Pain, all creatures get -2/-2. Now we're getting into some enchantment versions of creature destruction, disruption, or just straight up I don't like you. So you have Quarantine Field, which is 2 white, double X, so for every 2 mana you spend into X equals 1. Quarantine Field enters battlefield with X isolation counters on it. When Quarantine Field enters battlefield, for each isolation counter on it, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Quarantine Field leaves the battlefield. So it's one of those great powers later on in the game where if I have 7, 10, 15 mana, I could exile pretty much a substantial amount of your board. One thing I do want to clarify, which I found this out, which I thought was very interesting, with the newer errata of text, if you exile a commander with this and it goes to the command zone, if it does not leave the command zone itself, and this dies, they could bring their commander back from the command zone and put it straight into the battlefield if they hadn't transferred zones prior to this. So basically what I'm saying is that if I cast this, exile their commander goes into the command zone, they kill this, they could bring their commander back, as long as they hadn't attempted to cast their commander in between. Now we got Oblivion Ring. That errata that I just said doesn't work for Oblivion Ring, but it just comes in, exiles an online permanent. When Oblivion Ring dies, it gives them back to him. Then I got Active Authority, comes into play and exile an artifact or an enchantment. At the beginning of my upkeep, I can exile another artifact or an enchantment. If I do, that controller gains control of Active Authority. So I rarely do this, but it does give for the possibility. Stasis Snare, I love it because it flashes exiles. Banishing Light, same aspect. Or of Silence, just to slow them down, and I can kill an artifact or an enchantment. Then we got Exclusion Ritual, which is 6 mana imprint. Target non-land permanent. Players cannot cast spells with the same name as the exiled card. If they imprint a commander, it will not count. Now we're going to play some cards that just bring enchantments back from the graveyard, because obviously playing a very enchantment heavy package, I'm going to be running into a lot of problems where my opponents are going to try to destroy everything. So I'm going to try to find ways to counteract that. Replenish returns all enchantments from my graveyard back to play. Face Reward, which is 4 mana, instant speed, return to the battlefield all permanents in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So if they try to Akroma's Vengeance to fulfill the last couple points of damage, I could throw this back in as an instant, kind of a trick there. I'm trying to find Second Sunrise as well. It's just no one in my local area has one, so trying. Then you got Obsidat's Aid, which is 5 mana, return a permanent from a graveyard to the battlefield. Then Open the Vaults, which is 6 mana, return all artifacts and enchantments from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. Then I got Debtors Knell, which is 7 mana. At the beginning of my upkeep, put target creature in a graveyard into play under my control. So it is any graveyard. Now we have some enchantments that help win the game. So we got Bitterblossom, which is 2 mana. At the beginning of my upkeep, I lose a life and put a 1/1 black fairy rogue with flying onto the battlefield. It's a great way to keep consistency within my creature base. Starfield the Nyx. I've heard a lot of people complain about this card, but I use it as the win condition. So after I've had 5 or 6 different enchantments onto the battlefield, I play this for the win. I've used it for its alternative cost, which allows me to return an enchantment from the graveyard to the battlefield. So another way to bring those things back. Sigil of the Empty Throne. Whenever I cast an enchantment, I get a 4/4 Flying Angel. Then I have the combo, which is Sanguine Bond, Exquisite Blood. So whenever an opponent would lose life, I gain that much life. Whenever I gain that much life, target opponent loses that much life. So it creates an infinite loop between those two. So as long as I deal 1 damage or someone deals 1 damage to an opponent, I win the game. Now we're getting into some enchantment creatures, which is Underworld Coinsmith, 2 mana, 2/2, Constellation. So whenever he comes into play or another enchantment comes into play, gain a life. I could pay 2 mana, pay a life, and each opponent loses a life. That life gain is actually very, very important. So I play 1 of each of the gods. So I have Erebos, Heliod, and Athreos. I do want to clarify something with you. When you're actually playing a card like Starfield the Nyx or Opalescence, both of those kind of do the same thing. So it says each of these creatures, as long as you have control 5 or more enchantments, each other non-aura enchantment you control is a creature in addition to its other types, and it has base power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. I do want to clarify something, is that if I play this and then play a god, the power and toughness is 4. If I have the god already in the battlefield, it doesn't have to be a creature, just as long as it's in the battlefield. When you get devotion, its power and toughness is a 5/7. So it's actually time stamped, which is interesting because most people don't know that. So it's really cool to see the different interactions. When I first saw that, I was very confused, to be honest with you. But then I did research and figured out how it works, which is really cool. So Erebos makes it to where my opponents can't gain life. I could pay a couple mana, pay 2 life, and draw a card. Heliod makes it to where my other creatures have vigilance. I could pay 4 mana and put a 2/1 white cleric that's an enchantment creature onto the battlefield. And then Athreos is that whenever another creature I control dies, return it to my hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. These two are more useful as far as their abilities are concerned. Athreos is just an indestructible creature. Now we're getting into a little bit of ramp or control, which is land tax. If an opponent controls more lands than me at my upkeep, I could search my library for up to 3 basic lands and put them into my hand. Then Kor Cartographer comes into play. I search my library for plains cards, put it into the battlefield, and then Solemn Simulacrum. He's the only artifact in the deck. I don't even play Soul Ring or Sensei's Divining Top or any variation thereof, because I grab Stony Silence a vast majority of the time because people are so reliant on their artifacts. Here's a little bit of a control, which has Eidolon of Rhetoric, which is 3 mana. It's a 1/4 enchantment creature. Each player cannot cast more than 1 spell each turn. Then I play Rule of Law, which does the same thing. And I play Curse of Exhaustion, which only does it to 1 particular player. Then I got a few Planeswalkers, which is Ob Nixilis. Gives me some draw power and creature kill. Elspeth, creature army, and then destroy all creatures. And then Sorin, which is a good win condition, actually is the plus. So I build up a good protection, and then I just keep on plussing Sorin. It'll eventually get there. A couple graveyard hates, which is Leyline of the Void. If a card would put would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. It's a Leyline, so if it's in your hand at the beginning of the game, it comes into the battlefield for free, which is 4 mana typically. Then I play Necromancer's Covenant, which is 6 mana. When it comes into play, I exile all creature cards from target opponent's graveyard, then put a 2/2 black zombie onto the battlefield for each card exiled, and zombies have lifelink, which actually works very well because he's actually a zombie as well. So it's quite nice. I have a little bit of a recursion here, and this card's actually going to be the second Sunrise. But when it comes into play, I get to return an enchantment from a graveyard to my hand. Then I play Academy Rector. It's when he dies, or she dies, pardon me, I can exile her instead of putting her in the graveyard. If I do, I search my library for any enchantment and put it into play. Play Whip of Erebos just to give my creatures that lifelink. I never use the second ability. It is considered an artifact, but I really don't count it as an artifact because I never use it. And then I use True Conviction, which is 6 mana. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. This is actually an amazing combo with the Skyfield and Nyx to make it to where all my creatures are double strike and lifelink and makes every enchantment a creature. So I could swing for lethal, which is so much fun. Well, now that I've gone through that entire deck, I would like to hear what you guys think of it. And any feedback or recommendations would be awesome within the comments. As always, like, share, subscribe. Thanks, guys.